as actually being two things. There's one thing to turn a goblet and another thing to put rings on a spindle. I've given several demonstrations on the baby rattle that I make, and it's a similar kind of a thing. I bring the same tool that I do the baby rattle with to do these rings here. So some of you were here when I spun this up and got it round. I gave the demonstration for the St. Louis Club, and they have a chuck that's a little bit bigger, and so I was able to just stick the square stem in there. And before, what I did is just busted it down to round and put a tenon on it there. So first thing to do is to, can we move this out? That's good. We just need to remove this. So you can use a chuck, a Jacob's chuck and a drill, and drill into the end of it. But in a historical sense, back before we had twist drills and so forth, why we had a drill bit that was called a spoon bit. All right, it didn't have spiral flutes in it or anything like a modern drill bit does, but it looked a whole lot like this. Looked just like the end of a fingernail gouge. And so when you do this, when I do it anyway, you bring the tool up here, and you want to kind of work out a hollow in the end of the piece, and keep bringing the, whoop, and don't do that.
By the way, this is the President's Challenge for next month, too. This is a stem goblet, glass challenge, whatever you want to call it.
What's the diameter on that? What's the diameter on this?
I don't know.
Oh, what kind of wood you want to weigh?
This is ash. Yeah. So we'll tighten this up again here.
So you got to do the bowl of the goblet first.
Got to do the interior of the goblet first, correct.
That's exciting.
I think I'm running a little high here with the tool rest. So you can see what I'm doing. You got to look on the inside of this, where you rub the heel of the bevel, right? This part back here first, and in this case, bring the handle forward, and then you'll engage the edge. You see a little puff of dust there, right off the tip of the gouge. Maybe it shows up better out here. Same cut. So heel of the bevel, swing forward. So I'm going to go in. I'm not going to make this real deep. They get pretty difficult if you get in pretty deep. And so what I'm doing here is I'm going to go in just a little ways, and that'll make hollowing out the bowl pretty easy. Because this is an end grain turning, right? So the grain runs this direction. It's best if you can turn from the bottom of the bowl out to the rim. Richard Raffin does this really good job with this with a smaller gouge. And you can also do it with you can also just do it with a scraper. So if you do it this way, it can be done this way, but you're not not turning with the grain, so you hear all the chatter I'm getting out of it. I think I've still got a hook there from that initial catch. If you get chatter, like I'm getting here, one of the things you can do is it's a harmonic thing. So the more you stay with it, the more it'll vibrate and bounce on you, right? The more it'll rattle. But if you kind of push into it a little bit at a time, you'll interrupt that harmonic. Yes.
I was going to suggest to turn that light inside,
I'm sorry, do it again?
turn that light inside so we can see.
Okay.
what's in there.
Let's see, does this come off of here? Does this
Magnet.
magnet? Yeah, okay.
Right.
How about that?
Oh, yeah, we can see that like.
Oh, yeah.
Too much light out.
Like the sun.
Power of the sun here, huh? That gonna work?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, until it did that. Okay, again, I'm gonna rub the bevel, right? And then swing it out until I get a chip, a little bit of dust, and then push into it and come up and then dive in towards center. big round nose scraper, got a 1/2 inch square. So, the deal here is that when you turn inside of a piece like this, you'd like to have the cutting surface, right, a little above center. And the reason for that is that if you do get a catch, the tool will pivot down and out of the cut because it's still coming around. You see what I'm saying? If you have it right at center and you get a catch, it'll pivot down and grab more wood. You understand? If you have it up here and you get a catch, it pops down and comes completely out of the cut. Right? All right.
On your last cuts, how come you went in, up, and then back down to center instead of just straight in?
What's that now?
When you're doing your other,
With this tool?
other tool?
It has to do with presenting the edge directly to the wood so that it doesn't shatter so much. You get a little cleaner cut. You can hog off more material. It's a little more aggressive. Richard Raffin has got he makes these little scoops. And he's got this cut where he goes in at the bottom and then swings up. And the tool rides the bevel on the incoming side, right? And comes out. I haven't perfected it, but it looks like a really effective thing to do if you make a lot of that kind of thing. And I don't. So let me do just a little bit more cleanup on the inside here. You can see also I have this tool is not sitting flat on the rest. It's curved, it's rotated off a little bit, and so it's kind of a shear scraping cut. And this thing winds up pretty fast. So these are just some cleanup cuts. You can see these little feathery shavings. But I'm working from the bottom of the bowl, you might say, toward the rim, because that winds up letting it cut lift the grain.
Would you do a regular bowl that way too?
I'm sorry?
Would you scrape a regular bowl that way too?
Yeah, if the bowl is an end grain bowl, all right? If it's a face grain bowl, then you work from the rim, the large, and again, it's different to say, you have to say it like this, you have to say you cut from large diameter to small diameter, okay? If you have a bowl that has some closure, right, it doesn't just open up. If it has this kind of shape, then you turn from the rim to the center of the bowl, all right? You can say that, but it's more proper to say you turn from large diameter to small diameter. If it has closure, then there's a small diameter up here at the top. And so this part here, you turn from large to small diameter to the opening, and then you turn from large diameter to small down at the very bottom of the bowl, right? So that's one of the things that makes a bowl, a shape with a closure, a little difficult. You know, it's the next step up. So you understand what I mean by when I say closure to a form? Okay. So this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time sanding. There's a little bit of a crater in the bottom of the bowl here. You all know about the challenge to get those out. I'm not going to spend a lot of time sanding. You all know how to sand, that's good. So, is that good? All right. So the outside of the bowl here. So these are just cuts you make like you're turning a spindle. And you hear it chattering a little bit. If I lay a hand on it here, I'll get rid of these burrs there. If I lay a hand on it, almost eliminate the chatter. And I'm kind of checking it just to get a rough idea of wall thickness here. So to check the wall thickness, you do this on bowls as well. You get a regular outside caliper and you don't set it to the thickness of the bowl, of the wall, okay? What you do is you set it a little bit fat, okay, of the thickness of the actual wall. And then you pay attention to how much gap you have outside here. Is that clear on the video? Can you see the gap that shows up right here? And you see here how it changes?
Turn it,
Further back this way?
yeah, there you
Okay, so you see how it closes here? Huh?
go. You changed the camera.
Yeah, I thought it'd be better the other way.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
You're doing good.
This is only my second time, I'm sorry.
You see what's happening here though, right? You see how that gap diminishes as it goes further down into the bottom there?
Yeah.
And so that tells me that it's pretty good. You can put your finger here and sometimes you can feel it better than you see it. But it starts about right here. Can one of you grab that pencil for me there? Thank you, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and a damn few of us left. Okay, so there's a mark. That tells me where it starts to get thick, okay? And so now what I'm going to do is start a little bit prior to that. And I noticed it got deeper as we went further down in there. And this is just kind of general technique for doing a bowl, doing any kind of a form that you want to check wall thickness. So right now you can see the wall thickness is about like that. It's maybe a shy 1/4 of an inch. Okay, I can tell the sweep in, it comes in really fast like that. That tells me that I'm getting close to the very bottom of the goblet. And so we'll go ahead and run this down a little bit. Yeah, okay, so I made the lip fat here, right? So how do we get the calipers out there without changing it? You just twist one past the other a little bit. Yep, and you can pull it right out. I do a lot of, fun work with the rims on bowls. I think that's an opportunity that's kind of lost for a lot of folks when they're starting out especially. But there's a lot of opportunity there for design on the rims of bowls. So this is all I can tell you is there's a whole lot of just checking, making sure that everything's working just right. Here I can tell I got a little bit of fat wall about right in there. It starts. It's inconvenient at best to turn through the bottom of the bowl. Oh, that's nice. All right, to illustrate a point, you see how that margin stays pretty much the same all the way through here? Gets a little thicker at the bottom. That's okay. One more time here. I know y'all are getting bored with this. Oh yeah. All right, so does that show up? All right. There's just a whole lot of material to remove here. So at this point, we'll make a ring or two. Kind of eyeballing that center stem. Really doesn't matter how thick it is right now. It ought to be fairly thick to maintain stability out here. This thing is cantilevered off of here, and that's one of the reasons it's vibrating so much. I use a parting tool a lot to do things other than just make grooves, okay? If you sharpen it properly, you have certainly the one that everybody knows about, okay? You also have 1, 2, 3, 4 negative scrapers on there, and they all sharpen the same way. You understand what I'm saying? You pull this up against a stone, and you're sharpening this little chisel point on here, right? But you also wind up sharpening these other 4 inadvertently, as well as can be used very delicately like a tiny little skew chisel. So you have a point on either side here. And you can use it just like this, just like you would a skew. And again, it's just the point that's doing that, okay? Just that tiny corner on there. You can also use it over here like a scraper, negative rake scraper. And here what I'm doing is I'm switching hands. But that's the outside of the bead, outside of the, what do you call it there, the ring. Also, nothing says that these things have to have the cross section of the ring itself. It doesn't have to be round. You can make these square as well. All right, we can do that over here. And then I'm going to undercut this a little bit from either side. And that's just with the parting tool. Yes, sir.
How does it, I don't even have too much experience with it. How can they get a catch without doing that? Because I know there's 2 or 3 people that may have not done that. So can we tell them how to be careful not to get a catch, or if they're out and they got the tip hanging out there and they don't have it supported?
Well, it's meant to be used in this fashion.
Okay.
That's typically what everybody does. And it's a good way to do it, right? But if you take, I'm not talking about hogging off a lot of material. You can see I'm just making these tiny little shavings here. And so that's part of it. And it's also, you can also do a V groove with this thing a little bit, okay? You can go in, like what I like to do on these beads, is make a little line there. And that's with the tool held at a negative rake angle, okay? And then you just kind of bring it down a little bit and make a line. And that line can be used as well as a guide for a wire tool. You can burn that ring. I think I did I do that on one of the other pieces there? Yeah, so if you just hold the wire up there on a round surface, it wants to get real squirrely and dive off one way or the other. You put the tiniest little groove in there, and all of a sudden it just lays in there really nice, wind up the speed, and off you go. That make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. So in this case, when I'm coming in from the side like this, it's only the corner and the front chisel edge that's cutting, okay? I'm not scraping with this edge. I have to pull it completely out of, I rotate it this way and bring that edge completely out of play. If it's in play, then this thing will rotate, okay? So here I'm using the side of it, like I told you, and I rotate it and bring it out of play and go in. Does that show up on the... If you guys want to see this, please come up, And take the cue off of Ken there, or not Ken. Take the cue off of him and just blurt out a question here. So, this is a tool that I made. Actually, no, it's not one that I made. I had a friend that made it and gave it to me. But he saw the one I was using that I made about 35 or 40 years ago. And I just made it out of a, everybody know what a star drill is? Used to use it for pounding holes in stone, right? And I busted the tip off of it and hammered it out flat in a forge, right? And then bent the two ends and sharpened them, made a tiny little round nose tool, right? And then bent it around. And to sharpen this, you think, oh, hell, how am I going to sharpen that profile, right? You don't sharpen the profile. You turn this flat against the stone, and you do what's called a face grind on it, right? So you face grind this side, and you face grind this side. The other thing, too, is that both sides turn outward or inward. The first one I made, I thought, oh, left and right. Let's turn one out and one in, because the left, it didn't work at all. So this tool is used to get around the back side of the ring. And so from this side, and you want to give yourself a little bit of room in here. You can't engage the entire profile, okay? You can engage the near part of the turn, of the curve, or you can engage the outside of it, okay? Can't engage the whole thing. If you do, it'll fly apart on you. It'll be really inconvenient. You'll wish you hadn't done it. And you'll think, okay, next time I won't do that. You have to be real careful as you pull out. There's so many mistakes here are just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to pull out. And you wind up, catching it somewhere else. Again, really inconvenient. This is all real fine motor control. You can't sit here like this, okay? Not like that. And so you put a hand on the lathe, on the rest, put the tool down on the rest, and you're using it just like this, just tiny little movements here. But you have to be related to the lathe. So come in from the other side. And there we go. That one's free. I don't know, reasonable. And there's the other one. I'm gonna have to turn away a little more to be able to get some room in there.
Is that about a quarter of an inch hook? Or is it smaller than that?
Keep talking.
That hook, is it about a quarter of an inch?
Oh, it's more like an eighth. Here, let me pass it around.
What if you don't have one of those? How do you get the ring covers?
They make, I don't, you know, who is it? Craft Supplies sells one. It's a little more sophisticated than that one, I think.
Benjamin Best made a set of 3. Benjamin Best made a set of 3 at the.
Benjamin Best makes a set of 3.
PSI.
And they, what are they a two-sided tool like this, or is it
Just a one-sided ring.
one-sided, but you flip it over to turn the other side, I think.
Right.
Yeah, so the problem with that is they actually make the whole, or half the circle, I think, don't they?
Yeah.
And again, the issue there is you cannot engage the whole interior of that circle. If you do, it'll shatter the ring and shatter it all apart.
Keep way make it an Allen key.
Allen?
An Allen wrench.
Alan Creed, you really can't, the thing that's nice about, where is that one? Okay, go ahead, keep it. But the thing is it's made out of flat stock, and you'll notice that the cutting edge has been, it's actually out where one edge of the piece of stock is, right? And so if you use an Allen wrench, okay, what happens is now the thing rotates here. The thrust of the cut is here, but this one here is stable, right? So you might be able to do that out of a file. It doesn't have to be any exotic steel, just because you use it for a few seconds, right? There's one thing you do with it, right? And you don't do it very often.
How come you didn't want them one going to the right, one going to the left? How come you said
That
something
is the
or
right
right?
and the left.
That is the right and left.
I thought you said you made one or one
Oh,
for
look
the
at
other.
it.
Yeah.
How come that didn't work?
If you have them like that, right? You put it over here and it works this way, and then you turn it around and it still works that way. You make 2 rights or 2 lefts, you know. That's what they have to both point the same direction. That way, if that thing were bent, right? If it were bent, you'd see it right away, right? But the other way, it's bent like this, right? Both of them there, so it doesn't work so good. It works great for half of it. Okay, so one of the things you can do at this point, people used to give me trouble about the inside of the rings having this burr on the inside of it, right? And it does have a burr in there. And if you want to get rid of it, I generally just take them afterwards with a sharp pocket knife or a utility knife and just carefully cut that burr off the inside of the ring, okay? The other way to do it is to get a piece of sandpaper, turn the spindle down to a cylinder, okay? And then get a piece of sandpaper and put a rubber band around that piece of sandpaper, and then you can turn the lathe on, and then you can just hold the ring, and it works just like a little drum sander, okay? Does a really cute job. It's a real slick trick. I find it to be cumbersome. So the game here is, if you want little bitty thin delicate spindles, the game is you have to work on it from this end to this end. We're going to get this down pretty thin, and it's going to be really unstable. And particularly if you use green wood, then it's just like a noodle. If that's what you do, then you get the tailstock, and you put this thing full of, like, I don't know, some plastic or some newspaper or some tissue paper of some sort, and you gently put that in there. You can almost have absolutely no end pressure on it. If you have end pressure on it, and you have a little bitty tiny thin spindle, or if it's green,
you'll actually just crush it, okay? You know, what you're looking for is just kind of axial stability, not any kind of in play here at all. So it's kind of a delicate little dance there you got to do.
So Paul, what do you think of a flat file with the tang and work the tang? So you got the tang.
You could do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you have to harden it. You can talk to Bob here. You have to harden it, and then you have to temper it. Okay? And you temper it back to what? A yellow color? Probably? Yeah. I don't know whether, does that mean anything to y'all?
Yeah, but I couldn't get away with just grinding it, or how about it,
You might be able to get by with a few runs.
Kept it cool.
Yeah, if you didn't
That
get it
gets
hot,
cold
you
in
could
water.
just, you could just grind it out of the file.
Well, I was trying to help this guy find Alan, or an inexpensive tool, a file, if you kept it in the water as you ground it, so you don't get high temperature.
Yep.
You can get away with getting an inexpensive tool.
I can see I got some chatter on here still. I'm going to try and get it off.
So would you sand that during this phase?
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I'm not going to sand on it. Y'all know how to sand. Not going to bother you with it. These are all just kind of delicate little cuts. This cut with a gouge, you want to keep this thing turned up when you initiate the cut. This is like any other cove. When you start out, you turn it so that the sides of the flute are what they call 6 and 12. So on a bigger gouge, this is what's called 3 and 9, right? Horizontal. This is 6 and 12, okay? You initiate the cut at 6 and 12 off the tip of a fingernail gouge, okay? And that way the actual cutting surface sits right there and is vertical. If you have it turned one way like this, it'll spiral out off to the right. If you have it turned this way and you enter the cut, it'll spiral off the other direction. You understand? I'll show you here in just a second. Let me finish this up. Let me get that over here, and I'll show you what I mean about the cove and bead kind of thing. This is something we'll go over quite a bit at this class that we're putting together. So, if I put a cove in between those two marks, I need to start from the right side and go left, and from the left side go right. And you start with the gouge at 6 and 12, and then if you just do nothing more than this, if it's at 6 and 12 and you push in, what will happen is, you see the angle here? Can you make that out? Better here. So here it is. The flute is at 6 and 12. If I do nothing more than push straight in, it won't go straight in. What it'll do is it'll follow this bevel, and it'll actually wander over this way, away from the bevel, right? So if I want it to go perpendicular to the spindle, I have to bring that all the way around to here. And now if I push in on it, it'll go perpendicular to the spindle. Does that make sense to you? So, it's a little bitty, I don't know, 1/4 inch gouge. It's nice for doing these little, tickly little cuts. And so, we're going to start here. You don't want to start where your lines are. You have to have a place to fold material into when you're making a cove. So from the right, you can see how the chips go to the center here. And then as you get to the bottom of the cove, you rotate it. And when you get to the bottom of the cove, the position of the flute ought to be at 6 and 3, or what is it? No. Yeah, 3 and 6. And so if I want that to go square in, I got to get way over here. And you see the bevel back here now points perpendicular. And then we'll rotate as we get to the bottom of the cove. Anyway, is that clear? All right. I don't know what it is, but I always wind up wanting to put a bead in the middle of the stem. And a bead is one thing, but a bead with a little bit of a fillet on either side of it is a nice element. You'll see it a lot in any kind of traditional turning. A fillet is that little flat spot. And little flat spots like that don't show up very well. They're really small. And so if you undercut them slightly, instead of making them just flat, parallel with the spindle, when you do all this little bitty stuff, keep in mind that if you pay attention to what's going on with the cut, you'll actually lose track of the shape that you're creating. Okay, so you're working here and you're concerned about the sawdust and the chip and the edge, and you lose track of the shape over here. That's where you need to get to the point where you can trust that the cut's going to take care of itself. And what you need to do is watch the shape that you're developing on the other side of the spindle. So this fillet over here is a little bit fat, for my taste anyway.
Tape the rings to the cup.
You certainly could. Just get them the hell out of the way.
You ever got to worry about them catching on the tool?
I don't. You know?
Is there a possibility that they can?
Oh, I suppose, actually, I don't think that there is, because you're in here working. As you withdraw from, you know, it might be that you catch it, right? And you can also, I've taught myself how to, if it gets, you know, really bothersome, you can just hold them off to the side here. But you got to be able to train yourself how to do this one-handed too. Right? So in this case, I'm going to keep this a little bit further away from the rim here in case this thing starts to vibrate or, right? And so that way it won't bang against the tool rest. I want to do some more work down here. Has anybody got questions? Ash? No, not my preferred wood.
What is your preferred wood?
Oh, if you're going to make a functional piece, right? And I did a couple of really tall ones like this for a couple who was getting married at a wedding. How about that? Sorry. I made those out of cherry. It's a fairly dense and close-grained wood. Maple is another really good wood to use, and it's the same kind of consideration you give for a good, a usable cutting board, right? If you use oak for a cutting board, you wind up getting stuff hanging up in the pores of it, right? And then you wind up, it's not sanitary over a period of years, right? And the same thing happens if you're going to use the thing. And again, if you're going to use it, maybe it's best to go ahead and seal it with some kind of epoxy or something or other. And people think, oh, wait a minute, if you put wine in there, is that going to consume, is that going to draw some junk out of the epoxy? Well, the fact is, you're going to be using it maybe once or twice a year. You're going to be using it for a few minutes, right? I don't know how long it takes you all to drink a glass of wine or champagne, but it doesn't take me very long. And so the actual opportunity would be one thing if you're to leave that glass of wine sitting in there for a week, and the alcohol would work on the epoxy, and then a week later you'd come by and think, oh, I forgot all about that. Well, you might have a little liability of getting something out of the epoxy. But that's rarely the way things work, in my world anyway. So you see how this is all really controlled. I'm not sitting here doing this with it. It's all just a sweep. And I've got the thing pretty well connected to me. These are all movements. They're done basically with your body, not just with your arm, right? You get real good stability out of that way. Well, this is just icing on the cake, decorations, whatever you want to call it. This is very similar to doing finials, top of a box or something like that. These are all slicing cuts, they're not scraping, and so you get real nice, smooth cuts that scarcely need to be sanded. See how this is starting to wobble a little bit? I like to make the base a little bit smaller than the diameter of the actual cup, and so I'm going to set the tool rest parallel with the ways. The way you do that is you look past, you look at the edge here, and you look past and line it up with one side of the ways here, and that way you can be assured that it's fairly well parallel. and lock it down. So I'm looking at about a 1/4 of an inch gap here, and a little more like 3/8 or better over here. So we've got plenty of room. We can play here as well. These things are very lightweight, and they're not real stable. If you leave them out on a table in a little bit of a breeze, they'll blow off, right? And so I don't mind leaving a little extra mass down at the bottom of the goblet. It makes it more stable. I'm going to undercut this with the gouge a little bit. I'm going to have to get away some material there. Oh, hello. That's one of the first gouges I ever bought. You can see how much I've ground off of it. I think I'm going to get a new one soon. Huh?
You got your money's worth.
Money's worth out of that one for sure. Okay, once again, it's the same cut here that we made to hollow it out. It's essentially the same job I'm doing here. I'm going to rub the bevel and get a tip. Go in a little deeper here. There we go. There you go. Wow. So you see you've got one ring there that has a rectangular cross section, and the other two have got round cross section. You can also, if you start out large enough, you can also make one that'll go inside the other. They don't have to be both the same size. Just something to play with. Any questions?
Fantastic job.
All right.
Thank you, Paul.